Now, Senator Booker also said we should have bipartisan agreement. I think that's a great idea. We should have bipartisan agreement. How about we all come together and say, let's stop murders? How about we all come together and say, let's stop rape? How about we all come together and say, let's stop attacking pedophiles? I want you to look at what happened when the National Guard went to D.C. Robbery fell by 57%. Homicide fell by 58%. Sex abuse fell by 40%. Those are real results. And Detective Pemberton, if you would tell this committee what was the effect of the 2022 Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Law, and what would the benefit be for the people of D.C. if Congress passes my Clean D.C. Act?
In a chamber built on debate, where every word can shift the nation's course, one senator rises with a fire that cuts through the noise. The cameras roll, the crowd listens, and beneath the marble calm of Washington, a storm brews. His message, a direct attack on what he calls Democrat crime policies. His claim, that lives are being lost not by chance, but by choice. Tonight, we go behind the podium to uncover the battle over crime, politics, and power in America's capital, and why one senator says the blood on the streets is the result of laws written in these very halls.
You know, it's clear from this hearing the Democrat talking points have come out. Both Senator Padilla and Senator Booker spent a great deal of time talking about, quote, red states. There's a reason they were talking about red states, because unfortunately most red states have blue cities, and that's where the crime is. If you want to look at in 2023, the large cities with the most homicides per 100,000 people, number one was New Orleans, Louisiana. Number two was Memphis, Tennessee. Number three was St. Louis City. Number four was Baltimore City. Number five was Washington, D.C. Democrat crime policies kill people. Soros DAs who let murderers out of jail kill people. When you don't prosecute violent criminals, innocent victims die. Right here in Washington, D.C. in 2012, murders in D.C. totaled fewer than 100. By 2023, murders had nearly tripled, 274 lives taken in a single year. These are the real-world consequences of Democrat crime policies that let murderers go. It is very simple cause and effect. If you release murderers onto the street, they will kill people, and they do it all across the country. And we need to understand these are not just numbers. Here are some of the faces behind those numbers. Edward Korestein, 19, brutally assaulted during a carjacking attempt in D.C. Eric Tarpinian Jackham, 21, a young congressional intern gunned down in the capital city. Honesty Cheadle, 3 years old, just a toddler, killed by stray gunfire. Sarah Lynn Milgram, 26, and Yaron Lachinsky, 30, Israeli embassy staffers newly in love on the verge of engagement, brutally murdered. Mike Gill, 56, a husband, father of 3. Former Trump administration official shot in cold blood during a D.C. carjacking rampage. These aren't just names. These are sons and daughters, husbands and wives, parents and grandchildren. Mrs. Cook, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing the unbelievable pain and loss that you have endured through the loss of your grandson. I'm sorry that happened. Your grandson should have been protected. The city should have protected your grandson. He should still be alive. And tragically, this pattern keeps on happening. Now, Senator Booker also said we should have bipartisan agreement. I think that's a great idea. We should have bipartisan agreement. How about we all come together and say, let's stop murders? How about we all come together and say, let's stop rape? How about we all come together and say, let's stop attacking pedophiles? I want you to look at what happened when the National Guard went to D.C. Robbery fell by 57%. Homicide fell by 58%. Sex abuse fell by 40%. Those are real results. And Detective Pemberton, if you would tell this committee what was the effect of the 2022 Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Law, and what would the benefit be for the people of D.C. if Congress passes my Clean D.C. Act?
Thank you, Senator Cruz, and thank you for introducing the Clean D.C. Act, which repeals the Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Act. It is unquestionably one of the worst pieces of legislation, public safety legislation I've ever seen, and it has completely dismantled and destroyed the Metropolitan Police Department to the tune of more than 800 police officers short. It has eliminated their bargaining rights. It has eliminated their due process rights. It has changed the use of force policy so that facts unknown to officers can be used against them in charging them criminally. It exposes all of their personnel records to public databases. I could go on and on. It is an 86-page bill. Each subtitle in that bill is worse than the last, and it was designed to defund and destroy the police department. It was designed to hamstring police officers and make sure that criminals, even when convicted, would be protected from being held accountable. Repealing that bill is everything. It is the alpha and the omega of fixing criminal justice in the District of Columbia, and we must repeal that as soon as possible. This is what we have been shouting from the rooftops for 5 years. We knew it when we saw the language in the bill that it was going to be devastating. No one would listen to us. And thankfully now, thanks to your bill and Congressman Clyde's bill on the House side, we can actually get this bill repealed so we can get back to fixing the police department and bringing crime down permanently in the nation's capital.
And Detective Pemberton, you're the head of the D.C. Police Officers Union.
Yes, sir.
In your judgment, passing the Clean D.C. Act would make Washington, D.C. safer, would reduce murders, would reduce violent crime?
Permanently, yes, sir.
And I would point out again, Senator Booker, and it seems none of the Democrats are here now, Senator Booker said we should be bipartisan. I can think of few issues that are more natural for bipartisanship than stopping crime. It used to be the case. You know, this committee used to work together when it came to violent crime. It's only been in the last few years that elected Democrats have decided that releasing violent criminals is something to be celebrated. Earlier, Mr. Taylor made reference to Soros DAs. George Soros has spent millions of dollars electing DAs all over the country who turn around and let violent criminals go. The Democrat Party unleashed the crazy with the Abolish the Police movement. And the Abolish the Police movement wasn't just in the abstract. Cities all across the country slash funding for police. Minneapolis slashed the funding for police. The NYPD cut its funding over $1 billion. Sadly, Austin, Texas cut the funding for its police $150 million. When you take police off the streets, people die. There's a direct cause and effect, but there are two ways to abolish the police. One is going after the police themselves, which Democrats have decided that is their party position. But the second way you abolish the police is you put in place Soros DAs who just won't charge anyone. That means the police cannot do their job because when they arrest a murderer, a Soros DA turns around and lets them go. When they arrest a carjacker, a Soros DA turns around and lets them go. And for the life of me, I do not understand why Democrats are not celebrating the reduction in crime. Go back to the reduction in crime in D.C. that we've seen with the guard on the ground. You should be cheering a 57% decrease in crime, robbery, a 58% decrease in homicide. There are people in D.C. alive because the guard is there, and not a single Democrat is saying, that's good. Not a single Democrat is saying, we're glad those people are alive. Instead, they're saying, take them off the street and let the murderers run free.
Senator,
that's not serving anybody.
Senator Hawley.
When Senator Ted Cruz took the microphone in that Senate hearing room, the air felt heavy, not from formality, but from frustration. The kind of frustration that builds when crime stories stop being headlines and start being everyday life. He wasn't there to exchange polite words or party talking points. He came with a mission to confront what he called the real-world consequences of political decisions made in the nation's capital. Cruz began by drawing a line straight through the heart of America's political divide. He accused his Democratic colleagues of dodging responsibility for the violence erupting across U.S. cities that, in his words, have become blue islands in red states. He pointed to data that was impossible to ignore. In 2023, the large American cities with the highest homicide rates weren't random, they followed a pattern. Number 1, New Orleans, Louisiana. Number 2, Memphis, Tennessee. Then St. Louis, Baltimore, Washington, D.C. All places where the numbers tell the same grim story, where hope is too often replaced by fear. Then came the line that set the tone for the entire exchange. Democrat crime policies kill people. It wasn't just a political jab, it was a charge, a direct accusation that what's being debated in Congress isn't theory, it's life and death. Cruz's argument was simple and cold as arithmetic. When violent criminals are released, more violence follows. When prosecutors stop prosecuting, innocent people pay the price. And to prove it, he didn't use abstract data, he used names. He spoke about Edward Corstein, a 19-year-old brutally assaulted during a carjacking attempt in D.C. He mentioned Eric Tarpinian-Jackim, a 21-year-old congressional intern, young, hopeful, and gunned down in the same city where laws are made. He spoke of a 3-year-old girl, Honesty Cheadle, killed by stray gunfire, a child with no connection to politics, only caught in its consequences. He mentioned 2 Israeli embassy staffers, Sarah Lynn McGrim and Yaron Liensky, newly in love, on the verge of engagement, murdered before they could start their life together. And he told the story of Mike Gill, a husband, a father of 3, a public servant, shot in cold blood during a carjacking rampage. Each name hit harder than the last. They weren't statistics. They were reminders that policy has a pulse, and sometimes that pulse stops beating because of bad decisions. Cruz then turned toward a grandmother seated in the room, Mrs. Cook, who had lost her grandson to D.C.'s growing tide of violence. His tone shifted from fire to grief. "Your grandson should have been protected," he said softly. "The city should have protected your grandson. He should still be alive." It was one of those rare moments in Washington when politics took a step back and pain took the microphone. But the senator wasn't finished. After acknowledging the human cost, he turned to what he called the cause, the laws and the leaders that he believed made this crisis possible. He pointed to what he called the Soros DAs, prosecutors across America backed by progressive funding who, according to him, had turned leniency into lawlessness. When you don't prosecute violent criminals, he warned, innocent victims die. And then, almost like a prosecutor himself, Cruz presented his evidence, numbers that he said proved what enforcement could achieve when allowed to work. When the National Guard was deployed in Washington, D.C., robbery fell by 57%, homicide dropped by 58%, and sex abuse cases declined by 40%. The message was clear: accountability saves lives. But for Cruz, the fight wasn't only about results. It was about restoring respect for law enforcement, a profession he argued had been dismantled by political decisions disguised as reform. He called on Detective Greg Payton, the head of the D.C. Police Officers Union, a man who spent his life on the front lines of the city's streets. Payton didn't mince words. He described the 2022 Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Act as a disaster, a piece of legislation that, in his view, stripped police of their rights, morale, and effectiveness. He spoke of officers leaving in droves, of due process rights eliminated, of policies that used facts unknown to officers to criminally charge them. He described how personnel records were exposed to the public, leaving officers vulnerable and demoralized. It was designed to defund and destroy the police department, he said. To him and to Cruz, the only solution was the Clean D.C. Act, Cruz's proposal to repeal that 86-page law they believe crippled D.C.'s ability to fight crime. Payton called its repeal the alpha and omega of fixing criminal justice in the District of Columbia. For the senator, this was the proof that his crusade wasn't partisan but practical, that it wasn't about blue versus red, but about right versus wrong. Still, Cruz couldn't resist pointing out the irony in the room. The Democrats who often preach bipartisanship were absent during the testimony. It used to be, he said, that this committee worked together when it came to violent crime. It's only been in the last few years that elected Democrats have decided that releasing violent criminals is something to be celebrated. He accused them of unleashing what he called the crazy, the abolition the police movement that swept through cities after 2020, cutting budgets, closing units, and, in his view, opening the floodgates to chaos. Minneapolis cut its police funding. New York City slashed over $1 billion. Austin, Texas cut $150 million. And, Cruz argued, every cut came with a cost, measured in lives. When you take police off the streets, people die, he repeated. But he didn't stop there. He went deeper, saying there are two ways to abolish the police, one by cutting their funding, and another by electing DAs who refuse to prosecute criminals. The result, he said, is the same: a city where criminals walk free, officers lose hope, and victims are left behind. It wasn't just an argument, it was an indictment of policy, ideology, and what he saw as moral blindness. And as his words echoed in the chamber, it was hard to miss the silence from the other side of the aisle. There are people in D.C. alive because the guard is there, he said, and not a single Democrat is saying that's good. Instead, they're saying, take them off the streets and let the murderers run free. The hearing by then had become more than testimony. It was a battlefield, a clash between two competing visions of justice. On one side, those who believe in reform, that the justice system must change, must heal its biases, must find new ways to rehabilitate. On the other, those who believe justice begins with order, that laws mean nothing if they aren't enforced, and compassion means nothing if it puts others in danger. Cruz wasn't simply defending the police, he was defending a philosophy, that safety is the foundation of civilization, and that mercy without accountability is chaos. Whether one agrees or not, the message was clear. America is divided not just by politics, but by philosophy, by two visions of what justice should look like, one that trusts forgiveness and one that demands consequence. And somewhere between those two visions are the people, the families who've lost loved ones, the officers who still wear the badge, the victims who never saw justice. They're the ones paying the price for Washington's stalemate. Senator Cruz ended his remarks not with a slogan, but with a warning. When you arrest a murderer and a DA turns around and lets them go, people die. That was the line that hung in the air long after the microphones went off. The line that turned a hearing into a headline. Because at the end of the day, beyond the politics and the rhetoric, what remains are the same haunting questions. How much leniency is too much? How many lives must be lost before laws are rewritten? And when did justice become a matter of debate instead of duty? In that hearing room, beneath the ornate lights of the Senate, one thing became clear. America's fight over crime is no longer about policy papers or party platforms. It's about the moral cost of safety. And as the session came to a close, you could almost feel the weight of it, the echo of a truth that rings far beyond Washington. Every decision made behind the podium carries consequences on the streets.